OneWrestling.com presents Big Ray's Heel Appeal.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am Big Ray, the senior reporter here, and also a senior producer here at OneWrestling.com, and this is Big Ray's Heel Appeal. Now, what exactly is a heel? What exactly is a bad guy? Well, I mean, some people will say that, because somebody cheats, somebody, tries to do something that's not necessarily with the rules, it makes that person a bad guy. Not me. No, not me. I think this person is an opportunist. So what is this series about here on OneWrestling.com? Now, Bill Apter, and by the way, Bill Apter is one of the biggest heels in the business. Don't let that pencil neck geek fool you. He's the biggest heel in the business. No, not really. I'm pretty much a big heel. But, I started this series because me and Bill thought it would be really cool to talk about the bad guys, talk about the people in the industry that we love to hate. Now, me growing up, I've always been a huge fan of the heel. Why? You can ask yourself, well, why do you like the bad guys so much? Why do we cheer for guys like Rusev Day? You know what I mean? Why do we cheer for Brock Lesnar? Why did we cheer for Stone Cold Steve Austin when, in reality, he was probably one of the worst beer drinking? He would beat up his boss. Why do we hate Vince McMahon? I mean, the guy is a businessman. I'm going to give you a little history on why I love the bad guy so much. And every single week I'll present one of the greatest bad guy moments in professional wrestling history. And I'm going to start off with my personal favorite moment. Just so you know, ladies and gentlemen, my father, he was a bad guy. Well, not in reality, but in the world of professional wrestling, my father was a quote-unquote heel. He used to travel up and down the East Coast of the United States here in America, and he used to basically be one of the baddest guys in the promotion that he wrestled for, a gentleman by the name of Valentino, who ran a lot of independent promotions here on the East Coast. And my father wrestled as a leñador again, which is the lumberjack. He was one of the baddest guys, and he tag teamed with my uncle. They used to call him El Yancy. He used to wear a fancy yellow mask or a gold mask, and he was the high flyer. And well, of course, my father was the bruiser, the big bruiser. And, I love the bad guys. Why? Well, it was 1985. I think I was about 9 years old. It was October 1985. I was 9 years old. And I went to my very first wrestling event. It was in Madison Square Garden here in New York City. And, I got to see great legends. I got to see Macho Man Randy Savage was one of the best heels in the business, and he was also a good babyface, or a good guy as they call him. I got to see Tito Santana, Greg the Hammer Valentine, Andre the Giant, Hulk Hogan. Well, maybe not that night. I didn't see Hulk Hogan that night, but one of the reasons why I fell in love with professional wrestling was not because of any of the matches I saw. It was because of a segment I watched. And at this time, Bruno Sammartino, who in my father's eyes was the greatest heavyweight champion in professional wrestling history, came to the ring. And at this time, David Sammartino, his son, was being brought into the WWF, or the World Wrestling Federation at the time, which is now obviously the WWE. And again, this is 1985. And I got to tell you guys something. Madison Square Garden was terrible. I mean, there were people smoking marijuana up in the rafters, and my father, all he could afford was cheap seats at the time. But they were good enough to see the ring pretty damn good. I got to give him credit for that, Dad. Good job. Or maybe he was just being a heel, and he got me seats like that on purpose to teach me a lesson. And the lesson was that we should buy cable and watch wrestling at home instead of going to Madison Square Garden, which we ended up doing. But the fact of the matter is that night, I saw Bruno Sammartino come to the ring. Now, he had been retired for years at this point in juncture, but he was being interviewed by, in my humble opinion, possibly the greatest heel of all time. Somebody that we absolutely loved to hate. Who am I talking about? Well, this guy was billed out of Glasgow, Scotland. He was the rowdy one. Rowdy Roddy Piper. And I got him I got to see him during probably one of the greatest eras in WWF or even pro wrestling history. Now, Roddy Piper was a babyface in the NWA. He was a babyface in most of the major territories going into the AWA. But when he came to the WWF, he was a different entity. Roddy Piper was probably not only one of the best in-ring performers. Now, he wasn't technically the greatest. He was more of a brawler, but the guy knew how to control a crowd. You know, I have a good friend, his name is Ben Hameen, and the guy, you know, he's worked for OVW and 2CW, and he's been in the business for over 10 years. And he always told me that, which is something that he learned from another really bad guy that he learned how to wrestle from, and this guy is Rip Rogers. Rip Rogers taught him that a way to get over, a way to be popular with the fans, it's not necessarily your in-ring prowess, but you get over with character. And Roddy Piper was indeed a character. Now, again, let me tell you a little bit about this night. So, you have Bruno Sammartino. Again, I'm doing no notes here. I'm just doing this off of memory. And again, this is one of my fondest memories. Bruno Sammartino comes into the ring, and Bruno Sammartino is being interviewed by Roddy Piper. And Roddy Piper, obviously, is controlling the crowd. He's controlling the interview. He's doing his thing. Well, Bruno Sammartino did not take kindly to this. And, you know, I was looking at this, and I was saying, man, that Bruno Sammartino is a very popular guy, but what is it about this guy wearing that, well, I thought it was a skirt, but a kilt at the time. Cool Hot Rod shirt. I think at the time he had the cool white t-shirt with the panther on it. Anyway, you had to be there. But Roddy Piper proceeded to interview Bruno Sammartino. And Bruno Sammartino starts getting all tough and everything, saying, you know, you wouldn't have been anything in my era. I would have squashed you like a grape then, and I'll squash you like a grape now. And I remember watching this and saying to myself, this is one of the most entertaining things I've ever seen in my life, because Roddy Piper proceeds to not only use terrible racial epithets, at the time was common, I guess common in the world of professional wrestling, because bad guys did that, or heels did that. But what he did was he started making fun of Bruno Sammartino's cauliflower ears and the fact that his nose was so big and was smeared all over his face. Well, Roddy Piper did what most bad guys do when they're confronted by someone who can probably kick their butt. He backed off. But this is where I fell in love with Roddy Piper. Roddy Piper became what I call not a heel, not a bad guy, but an opportunist. He took the opportunity while Bruno Sammartino's back was turned to hit him with a steel chair, and then proceeded to take that chair and drive it into the throat and neck of Bruno Sammartino, attacking Bruno Sammartino. Roddy Piper would go on to wrestle at WrestleMania 1 against Mr. T. And now, was he necessarily the bad guy in this match? I don't think so. Who the heck was Mr. T to come into the ring thinking, you know, just because you were tagging with Hulk Hogan, thinking that you could take on Roddy Piper and Cowboy Bob Orton? Are you kidding? Roddy Piper proceeded to go wrestle at WrestleMania 2. And Roddy Piper would beat the living snot out of Mr. T, and I loved it. But again, let's go back again to 1985. The reason I fell in love with Roddy Piper was because I always felt he never got his fair share. And I'm going to go on and I'm going to talk about a whole bunch of great heels in the pro wrestling business. Off the top of my head, I mean, one of the greatest managers of all time was, well, basically a heel. Bobby the Brain Heenan. We're going to talk about Bobby the Brain Heenan. And there were a couple of good guys, like, let's say, Captain Lou Albano, who originally was a terrible guy. How about George the Animal Steele? I'm not just going to talk about old wrestlers. I'll talk about new wrestlers as well. We'll talk about your Seth Rollins. We'll talk about your Triple H's. We'll talk about your Stone Cold Steve Austins. We'll talk a little bit about everyone, because you know what? Even John Cena was a bad guy when he started. You can't see me. People say he's a bad guy now. Is Roman Reigns a bad guy? I mean, this is what the heel appeal is going to be all about. You know, one of my very favorite moments in professional wrestling, I'm going to talk about another one. And Bill Apter brought this up. And guys, please tune in here at One Wrestling Video, OneWrestling.com. Subscribe at One Wrestling. And Bill Apter has a weekly magazine segment on Thursdays, usually around 7 p.m. if he can get on at the time. And it's live. It's awesome. And Bill Apter, what he did was he has little segments, and he brought me on, and I did the heel appeal. And again, he thought it would be great to just do this, on a regular basis. So I said, you know what, cool, I'll do it. And I talked about one of my very favorite moments, and I can't remember the damn year because I don't have my notes in front of me. But I remember I was a kid watching the Superstars of Wrestling. One of the greatest. Let me talk about this guy really quickly. This guy's probably one of the greatest men in the world of professional wrestling. I mean, who am I talking about? Well, his name is the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. Him. He's pretty freaking cool. He's a good guy. What do you mean he's a heel? What are you talking about? The guy, let's run this down. The guy was a self-made millionaire. Okay? The guy would basically give money away. I mean, yeah, he would shove them down the throats of ham and eggers here and there, but other than that, he's giving the money away. It's not like he took the money back. Sometimes he did. Maybe the guy didn't deserve it. He gave this buffoon, Virgil, a well-paying job. I mean, the guy worked. All he had to do was drive him around, pick some stuff out of his toes, He would handle the money for the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, and he was paid very well. And eventually, what happens? A good guy. This is why I say Ted DiBiase was not necessarily a bad guy, because he got stabbed in the back. And then he proceeded to pay Andre the Giant to win the WWF World Heavyweight Championship from that greedy, half-bald-headed joke of a wrestler in Hulk Hogan. Yeah. He paid Andre the Giant good money to take the WWF title. And yes, he might have paid the referee at the time, whatever his name was, Gimmick Jones, to get plastic surgery. And then he had 2 referees. And it was all craziness there. But you know what? How brilliant was the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase? He was very, very smart. But apparently, some guy by the name of who was the president? Who was the president there? Jack Tunney. He decided to. And it's Carl, the cameraman. Anyway, he doesn't. We don't pay him much. But anyway, not Carl, but the president decided to strip $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase of that title. So what did he do? Ted DiBiase reached into his own pocket. He didn't, ask Vince McMahon or whoever was running the WWF at the time to give him a title or to give him a title shot. He said, you know what, I'm going to make my own title and I will defend it like the true champion that I am. And he did. He did. But one of my very favorite moments in the world of professional wrestling was a moment when it was the Superstars of Wrestling. He called this little boy Sean up to the stage. And Sean, he was a cute little boy, I guess, whatever. And he brings him to the stage, and all he has to do is bounce the basketball 15 times. And Ted DiBiase had the basketball with him. And he even gave him a test. Listen, Ted DiBiase was great at teaching life lessons. And I'm going to teach you the life lesson at the end of this video. He let the kid practice. The kid bounced the ball like 50 times. No problem. But when the heat was on, and the kid had to bounce the ball to 15, he only dribbled up to 14. Yes, I know people will say Ted DiBiase kicked the ball out of the kid's hands. And if he did, I thought it was a mistake. But if he did, the fact of the matter is this: he taught this young man a lifelong lesson. What is that lesson? Well, the lesson is that if you don't get the job done, you don't get paid. Good times. I mean, there was nothing like seeing that little boy crying on stage. But guess what? I'm pretty sure if you look at that young man right now, he probably has a fantastic job. He probably owns 3 cars, 2 houses, probably has a gorgeous wife. Kid learned a lesson that day. And I learned a lesson too. If I want to get the job done, if I want to get the job done first, I have to really get the job done. If I want to get paid, I got to get the job done, and vice versa. The $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, taught me something. Everybody has a price. And it's true. Not necessarily a bad guy. Let's go back to 1985 Roddy Piper. Again, this bad guy made me fall in love with the world of professional wrestling. If it wasn't for Roddy Piper and what he did to Bruno Sammartino, he showed me that sometimes in life you got to take an opportunity. I mean, let's look at it now. Let's use an example now. Seth Rollins. He took an opportunity. Look where his career, skyrocketed. Listen, guys and gals and girls, by the way, love the bad guys. Every single week, like I said, ladies and gentlemen, this is more of an introduction to what the show is going to be about. And it's not going to be a super long show every single week, but I will have it either every Friday up or every Saturday up. And I will talk about the quote-unquote bad guys. And listen, ladies and gentlemen, why don't you be a good guy? Why don't you subscribe to One Wrestling Video? Follow me on Twitter at Big Ray Show. Give me some ideas regarding who you would like me to talk about. I'll talk about the history, some of the greatest bad guy moments, some of the best tag teams, not just WWE, NWA, heck, TNA, WCCW, the AWA. We have unlimitless, I can't speak today, potential with this show. So again, ladies and gentlemen, this is more of an introduction to this this little segment we're going to be doing here at One Wrestling Video. I hope you guys enjoy it. I hope you guys watch it. And if you don't, then who's really the bad guy? Listen, ladies and gentlemen, again, this is Big Ray reporting here for OneWrestling.com/One Wrestling Video on YouTube. Ladies and gentlemen, like I said, sometimes it just feels so good to be so bad. Leave your comments here below. Let me know who you'd like me to talk about. Maybe I'll call in some guest. Maybe Bill Apter will hook that up. Who knows? Maybe I'll have Bill Apter on to talk about his favorite bad guys. You know who his favorite bad guy was? Huh? Anybody? You didn't read his book? There's a guy by the name of Buddy Rogers. Maybe we'll talk about that next week. Maybe I'll have Bill come on with me. Ladies and gentlemen, I will be back next week for technically episode 2 of Big Ray's Heel Appeal. Thank you for joining me here at One Wrestling Video. And remember, it's not being bad. It's just being an opportunist. Peace, guys.